Welcome to the June 29th, 2023 Planning Commission Committee of the Whole Special Meeting. My name is Blandy Miller, and as Vice Chair of the Planning Commission, I'm the ex officio chair of this committee. At each meeting, I like to take a point of privilege to say, with the utmost respect for the important and diverse views of the public and the applicants, staff, and my fellow commissioners, I look forward to a robust and lively debate and split votes where we do not agree and efficient action items on which we do. Before we begin, at the beginning of each meeting, we give the members of the community an opportunity to speak on an item not included in the agenda. Are there any members of the public here to speak on an item not on the agenda? Seeing none. I will defer to staff on the AV over there. Seeing none, I will move. Commissioner Roberta Fox has previously been recused from these cases. Without objection, I will recuse Commissioner Fox from the hearing these cases today. Commissioner Fox, is there anything you'd like to add?
I've requested to recuse myself from these two items. My firm worked on the area planning process, which led to these two items, the comprehensive plan amendments, and then also the TOD overlay. Although there is no direct financial gain to myself from these items going through, out of an abundance of caution, I am asking to recuse myself.
Thank you. You're recused. Okay, so let's begin. There are two items on the agenda today: the New Bern Station Area Planning Study and Comprehensive Plan Amendments, and a city-initiated case to rezone 744 properties along the New Bern Avenue corridor in accordance with that study. This is the second time we have heard these items. At our April 26th committee meeting, we heard a full staff presentation, we received over an hour of public comment, and we had a brief discussion at the table. During that process, we identified several questions and concerns that warranted further research and discussion. To address the calendar and deadlines for action, for both of these items, the Commission requested and received an extension of time from Council. The deadline for action on both items is now November 22nd. This means that the committee could hear these cases at a total of 5 meetings. The first was in April, the second is today's, and there's the potential for 3 additional meetings that could occur monthly starting in August. On a parallel track, there is a text change TC 223 titled TOD Revisions that addresses several aspects of all transit overlay districts citywide, including this one. Some of those key items in that text change address removing the prohibition on single-family homes in the TOD, and how the TOD interacts with neighborhood conservation overlay districts, or NCODs, and with historic overlay districts, or HODs. We understand the community's concerns on these topics as they relate to the New Bern corridor, and those issues will be thoroughly addressed and debated at the text change meetings. I suspect the Commission might hear input on those topics today, but since those items can only be resolved through the text change process, as a Commission, we will not debate that text change today and instead hold our discussion until the text change meeting. The deadline for action on those items has been extended until October 5th, I believe, just quickly double checking. October 10th. October 5th, so that we can review and resolve those text change issues prior to voting on these cases along New Bern. As for timing on today's agenda, this meeting will run until 6:30. As a commission, our goals today are threefold: to continue to receive important community input, to engage in a robust discussion at the table with an aim to identify concerns and improvements to the comp plan, and to begin review of each of the 40-plus rezoning cases that have received specific public comment. To that aim, first we will receive a staff presentation on both the comp plan and the rezoning requests. The comp plan presentation will focus on questions raised at our prior meeting, and the rezoning presentation will focus on an overview of the criteria that staff used to generate their recommendations for individual parcels. Second, after the staff presentation, we will receive public comment on both the comp plan and the rezoning requests simultaneously. First and foremost, our goal is to make sure we receive maximum public input given the practical time limitations for these meetings. To the members of the public who submitted emails and comments on the portal, please know that those are submitted into the official record, and we have each reviewed all of them. The agenda materials include the name of 16 individuals who spoke at the April meeting, some of whom spoke twice. Those 16 community members provided important perspectives and concerns that the commission and staff continue to study and digest and that will stay in the front of our minds as we review these cases. But so that I can get a feel for timing, by show of hands, how many people here wish to speak who did not speak at the last meeting? 1, 2, 3. Thank you. That's helpful. After public comment, as a third item, we'll bring the discussion back to the table. Today, our two goals are to advance the ball regarding changes to the comp plan and to begin review of the 40-plus rezoning cases in the staff presentation. So with that, we will turn to Ira Mabel for a presentation from the city.
Yep, thank you, Commissioner Miller. Good afternoon. My name is Ira Mabel from Planning Development. I will also, point of privilege, thank Raleigh Convention Center for having us and RTN staff, who we value every Planning Commission meeting, but especially in unusual locations for us. Also, just for your awareness, Het Patel from Raleigh Transit is here, should there be transit-related questions to help. But so I did print some material for the rezoning request so that you would have an easier time rather than following along on the big screen. I don't have the comp plan amendment. I seem to have forgotten those, so I apologize. I recognize it might be awkward for you to see from there, but so I do have a bit of an update for the comprehensive plan amendment, and also there is a memo in the backup responding to questions from last time. So for starters, this is a bit of an unusual comp plan update in that there is implementation happening, so it is related to the bus rapid transit project, which is moving along, as well as other things just due to happenstance of timing. So there has been some action at the city council level that is directly related to stuff, to language in the comp plan. So you may have seen in the news, we are moving ahead with the due diligence for purchasing the DMV site. And the real estate division also got authority to purchase a pretty important site for us in terms of plan recommendations on New Bern Avenue near Fisher Street and Raleigh Boulevard. So those are directly related to actions in the plan ongoing. There is an action recommending a text change, which has been in the drafting process for some time, still moving forward, hopefully coming to a text change committee near you soon. The Raleigh Transportation has been starting a Tarboro Street project. They've had one, I think, kickoff sort of charrette-style meeting. That's directly related to a couple of action items. And the plan recommends new city staff, some of which have been hired. So in particular, in our small business development office, used to be called economic development, there is staff dedicated to businesses affected by BRT projects. So some of the stuff has been rolling downhill as we've been reviewing and preparing. The other thing is I talked a bit last time about the Public Project Community Support Fund. There were some questions about that. I've also had some questions from the public about grant money that was available, asking how that was available. So this is my latest update. The way that has worked is Housing and Neighborhoods has accepted proposals from nonprofits. They have contracted with 4 of them, so I have sort of a summary of the scopes of work that those 4 who have received money for New Bern specifically are doing. So Carolina Common Enterprise is working with existing businesses with various assistance programs. El Centro Hispano is specifically working with Latino businesses on the corridor. The Greater Raleigh Chamber of Commerce has activities for helping during construction in particular. And the latest one, the Southeast Raleigh Promise, is one related to homeowners. So the first 3 were business assistance. This Southeast Raleigh Promise has a scope of work for assistance to homeowners. So that's just a brief update from what else has been going on that City Council has been doing. So next I will move into questions from the commission to staff last time. There is a memo with more detail in the backup, but for starters, Commissioner Bennett had asked a couple of questions about a couple of actions related to road safety. And I gave the answer I had at memory. I've since then gone back and checked with other project staff to sort of catch me up on the history of how all that had worked. So I would say those particular actions, 7, 8, and 9, were really related to safety of the roadways. So the station area plan did do, part of the preliminary data collection was about traffic, vehicle crashes and fatalities. And so those actions, for the most part, were meant to address that concern. Particularly, there was a lot of discussion about the one about different sizes of vehicles. I think the plan acknowledges that not only is this roadway fast, which accounts for some of this as design, but in general, larger vehicles are much more deadly. But acknowledging your comments, I think there's a couple of proposed red line changes trying to address that. Would welcome additional feedback if we think we did not quite hit that mark. Similarly, you had some comments, Commissioner Bennett, about Black Raleigh. I will say there was a lot of intentionality in the New Bern process to be very New Bern specific. That didn't always translate into the final, 1 or 2 sentences in the comp plan amendment. So again, did go back to try to revise to make that more specific. This one was not a question from you, but a suggestion from staff. So there was an action suggesting a mixed-use redevelopment of the Tarboro Road Community Center. Since then, planning staff has continued to investigate that. Our urban projects group has done some preliminary analysis to look at the feasibility. Additionally, and unexpectedly, that from the timing when we were drafting this, that park was included in the bond that passed recently. So at the time of the plan, Raleigh Parks did not think that was going to happen. They were not planning that. They had some very, very early ideas, but were thinking that would be in a future bond. So based on the UPG's work, which showed it would be very difficult given the size of the site to make that sort of development work, and just the nature of the bond financing, we're suggesting that we no longer propose the affordable housing component of the Tarboro Road. So that's sort of didn't want it to move forward when we know it's probably not going to happen, to be misleading to everybody. And then a couple of questions that did not result in red lines from me. So there were some questions or comments from last time about crime or perception of crime near existing bus stations. So we did have this discussion in quite detail during a previous area plan, Capitol North, that I worked on, and ultimately decided that an area plan, policies and actions in an area plan can do very little to address that sort of issue. There are other actors at play who have from the city that have much more influence there. But there were 2 actions that did come out of the Capitol North or into the Capitol North plan. Those are Action 8 and 25. They are pretty generic. So, could have something else with that's also similarly generic. I'm not sure if that seems to be of interest to the commission. And the capital project, this here is essentially designed. So that one in particular for capital was looking for a future capital project. This one, I think, this is less appropriate now since the capital project is breaking ground. But happy to talk more about that. And then Commissioner Otwell asked for some more data about displacement. I did a very rough sort of pull from the census for a couple of points. I would say we'll say that we are planning to use the summer to bring to City Council at the very least, if not Plan Commission, a more detailed analysis similar to this. This was my sort of screenshot version from the census. But the story is basically the block groups, especially in what's called the Western Station areas, for the past decade, have definitely been getting, on average, higher income and less white, is my short answer. So I can sort of go through the comparison if that is of interest to have further detail. But that's sort of what I could give from you at this stage. And we are planning to do a bit of a more thorough analysis than I was able to put together. I think that's the last thing for the comp plan update. Is just housekeeping. So I think Commissioner Miller already explained the extension. And the committee should all have a poll from me asking for potential dates in August and September. So if you could reply to that at your earliest convenience, I would appreciate it. And we can get some more meetings scheduled. But happy to take questions as we pause between agenda items from the committee.
Thank you. I think we will have some follow-up, but we'll hold it
Okay.
until we have table discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving on, this is going to be very short, although I do have a lot of slides that I will save for later. Just to recap, the rezoning request Z9222 is to rezone 750-ish parcels between downtown and Henningham Boulevard and New Bern Avenue. To primarily do these 4 bullet points, so add the Transit Overlay District, or TOD, increase building height, change some base districts and frontages, and remove legacy zoning conditions. So I do have some summary slides to help orient us. This is the Eastern Station, so east of 440, the Middle Station areas between Raleigh Boulevard and the Beltline, and the Western Station areas. So that's how the New Bern Station Area Planning study grouped the station areas for better engagement and organization and conversation between staff and the public. So that's how I have continued to do it in the rezoning request, to sort of stay the same. For every rezoning request goes on our online portal for public comment. In this particular case, that is where we were directing people who were requesting that we modify. So this is the city is the applicant, staff is the applicant. So we were requesting people who wished for us to modify the request to use the portal. So there is a full export of all the comments out of that. That was not the only way. I did get plenty of emails and phone calls that are also in that list. And we did receive quite a number of requests from property owners to do something different, either to add them to the request when they were not, or to remove them from the request, or to change staff's proposal to something else, were the 3 categories. So that full table is in the memo in front of you and in the backup. I did sort of number them geographically, again, via the station area groupings to help us all keep track of where we are. And so for each request, for those of you who might remember when we applied the Transit Overlay District to the Southern Corridor and the Western Corridor a couple years ago, we did receive similar requests for people to be added or removed, and staff provided a recommendation or endorsement, so to speak. So we did the same process here. I will say that this request is much more complicated than that one, those 2. So the Western and Southern was only applying the TOD, doing nothing else. So the first of these 4 bullets. This request is doing more, so it's applying the TOD, but also doing other zoning things. The other way it's more complicated is we have done New Bern Station Area Planning for over a year. So there is detailed recommendations in that plan, and land use recommendations and other things that Western and Southern are getting. Those projects are kicking off this year, but did not have at the time. So in general, the rezoning, the moving parts of that rezoning were simpler. So we did have some criteria for which to evaluate. To give you that recommendation, though, we did want to be consistent with how we treated those 2 cases. So that's on page 3 of the public engagement summary memo, and on this slide, the sort of list of things we were considering. The first was the goal of the planning project, and how well this particular request advances or impedes the goal. The second was how far away is it from what we were authorized to do by City Council. So when staff is an applicant, the first step is to get council to give us permission to go forward. And so we take changes from that pretty seriously. So looking at how much of a departure is the word I used from the original authorization from council was the request. Number 3 is if the request to add in particular is contiguous with where we're already mapping the TOD, which was a big criteria for us when we drew the line in the first place. Number 4 was the distance from the BRT station. Again, the goal for this project is for places within walking distance, reasonable walking distance. And then the last bullet was other land use policies, so particularly the future land use map and height guidance. So that's where I got on all the slides on every request. If you'd like further questions for a particular one during questions, I'd be happy to do that. I do want to say very clearly that that is not a opinion from staff on if this property were to request this particular zoning district as an independent rezoning request, right? So if property owner X has to be included in a certain way and the recommendation is do not accept, that does not mean if they were to file their own zoning petition and go through the process, that would be inconsistent with the plan or anything. That was not what I was doing. I was very particularly focused on the goals of this zoning request and the parameters that we work under when we're the applicant. So I just want to make that clear to everybody. And I think that is where I'm supposed to stop. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if some of that was confusing before you hear from the public.
That was very helpful.
Okay.
I'm sure we will have you back up at the podium for questions very soon. Next, we will move to public comment. We will receive public comment on both the comp plan and on the rezoning requests simultaneously. As we've stated, first and foremost, our goal is to make sure that we receive maximum public input given the practical time limitations of this meeting. To that end, we will first hear from members of the community who did not have an opportunity to speak at our April meeting. Again, just because some folks came in, by show of hands, how many people here wish to speak who did not speak at the last meeting? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in that case, to ensure we receive maximum public input, we're going to limit each speaker to 2 minutes. When you come up to speak, please introduce yourself with your first and last name. For decorum purposes, if you have previously spoken and come up to the podium out of order, you will be asked to hold your comments until your allocated time. Once the new speakers have completed their comments, we will move to, sorry, I just lost my spot. Any remaining time will be allocated to those who have previously spoken. To ensure that the commission has adequate time for table discussion, we will end all public comment no later than 5:20. After we bring it back to the table, we may pose questions for staff and individuals, but we will not receive any further public comment. So with that being said, if the speakers could come and begin to line up, who would like to kick us off?
Sorry. This is a new room for us, so I don't have a great idea. Why don't...
We can just have one at a, if you can generally, I think lining up might be difficult, but
Yeah.
For and against? Are we splitting it up, or is it just still?
Yeah.
yes. I know this is a complicated thing. Perhaps it would be easier this way. If you're here to speak in favor of the TOD, please line up first.
Favor, yeah. So that's typical. Just name it.
Sometimes it's complicated where they just want to talk about an individual request in this case as opposed
Here's
to.
good.
opposed to
Okay,
tonight.
great.
Bynum will be keeping the time for the 2 minutes per speaker on the big screen.
Oh, Ira's good.
Excuse me, Iris keeping the time. Okay, thank you. And if you'd please introduce yourself as you start.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi there. My name is Rebecca Henderson. I live at 131 East Davie Street, just a few blocks away from the planned terminus of the New Bern BRT, which I am really very, very excited about. I'm here to express my support for the TOD rezoning. I think it will do a lot to revitalize an often underinvested part of Raleigh, and it will ensure that this BRT, which the city is spending a lot of money on, this BRT is a success by creating dynamic living spaces and communities nearby. Raleigh needs denser housing near its transit to ensure we make climate-friendly choices for our future. Please don't let any naysayers stop the needed change that's vital for the continued success of Raleigh, its growth, in its resiliency, and the BRT it's giving so many resources to. Please trust the expertise and the guidance of the city staff who spent months preparing this. The BRT is coming no matter what this TOD does, and we should ensure that the land surrounding it is accessible to all with all types of housing, rather than it being permanently stuck as expensive single-family housing. Thank you so much for your time.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I am Sig Hutchinson, former County Commissioner and current Chair of Go Triangle, even though I'm speaking for myself personally today in favor of the Transit Overlay District. Several months ago, me and several elected officials were up in Washington, D.C., talking to the Federal Transit Administration. What they told us was, we are so excited about BRT. Raleigh, Wake County, we will give you as much money as you want to fund BRT at 50 cents on the dollar. But there's a but. And the but is, it has to be part of a plan. And that plan has to include housing and connectivity to jobs. Affordable housing, workforce housing, all types of housing, which is exactly why we need to support this overlay district to continue to bring down federal funding. Second of all, as a commissioner 3 years ago, we did a long-range comprehensive land use plan. The whole idea of that plan was to direct growth towards urban centers, which is exactly why we need to approve this comprehensive land use overlay district today. Reducing congestion, reducing sprawl, saving open space, creating healthy communities, and saving the planet. Finally, we clearly understand the need for affordable housing. And what affordable housing means is more housing, more product on the ground, which is exactly what we're talking about today. So this comprehensive overlay district will bring down federal dollars, increase affordable housing, reduce sprawl, reduce congestion, increase healthy communities, and happier citizens. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Adam Turando. I live at 910 Tryon Hill Drive, apartment 554. Yes, I'm a renter in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm speaking in support of this. I'm also the chair of Wake Up Wake County. We support sustainable growth in Wake County. I'm also a former member of the Planning Commission. I was on the Passenger Rail Task Force. I was on the Wake County Transit Advisory Committee, and I'm a climate scientist in my day job. So if you see right outside right now, we're experiencing extreme heat and air quality issues from fires in Canada. Climate change is happening now due to actions that we humans are doing, and it's related primarily now to how we get around by driving. And so if we're going to deal with that issue, and if we want to do something now and in the future for kids and grandkids, my daughter's turning 5 today, we need to do things like this to make it easier for people to get around without driving. It's as simple as that. And this is a very critical part of doing that for our community. So I strongly support this. The issues that come along with this are valid and reasonable, and I completely understand those issues, particularly as being a renter myself. So issues of displacement for existing residents in the neighborhood are real and true, and we need to work so hard to try to address those as well. And I want to be there, right there with all of those people that have those concerns and those real legitimate concerns about this, to try to work with the city and the county to provide more affordable housing and more options for people that are renting and are worried about being displaced. But in the meantime, we have got to make it easier for people to get around in this community without having to own and drive a car, and to help our planet and the environment and really our community move forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Samuel Henderson. I live in 131 East Davie Street, apartment 520. I support the TOD zoning. Bus improvements are coming to New Bern for one of the most heavily ridden bus routes, which will make the bus faster and more consistent. But with those bus improvements, the area is likely to become even more desirable. If we don't pass the TOD rezoning, it's likely that we will end up with a similar situation as what we have in many neighborhoods near North Hills. Old houses will get torn down and replaced with giant single-family homes. causing extensive displacement. TOD focuses all of the development right along Newbern, and more density allows for more options. So young adults, retirees, people have options to stay in their neighborhood if they want to. There's tons of single people out there, there's tons of young adults, there's tons of retirees that want a place to live that's not going to be a giant 3-bedroom single-family home. We have to allow that to be built.
Afternoon, y'all. My name's Harry Johnson. I live at 529 Watauga Street in Raleigh. I am an attorney by training. I'm also a city planner by training. Go Heels for my sins. But I'm here today to speak in support of the TOD and to speak in support of bus rapid transit, both from a climate perspective and from an equity perspective. From a climate perspective, my day job is helping to build and construct solar farms and wind farms. That's a really critical appointment of part of tackling the climate crisis. But just as equally important is ensuring that we have the land use changes and the transportation changes to allow people to get around without a car. Cars are great. I own a car. Car dependency is the single biggest issue driving climate change and greenhouse gas emissions right now. And we have to start somewhere. And I'm not going to pretend that BRT on Newbern or Wilmington, anywhere else in Raleigh, is going to solve our region's entire problems related to land use. But it's a start, and you have to build and be incremental over time. From an equity point of view, I'm also a resident of Oakwood. I'm a member of the Society for Preservation of Historic Oakwood, just because I live there. And since moving there probably 10 years ago, the neighborhood, which wasn't that affordable then, it has just gone out of control. And you see that as you continue to head east down Newbern Avenue. Most of the corridor is now just unaffordable for the average median income in the city with current zoning conditions, and that's going to continue to increase. And we collectively as a city have to act in order to provide people with more options in terms of the type of homes where they live and in terms of providing public investment for subsidized housing, which we need to do a lot more of. And so there's a lot of small moving parts that all have to act in concert to help this happen, and this is one of those. So please support this. Thanks.
Hello, y'all. Jennifer Truman. I'm speaking today for myself as a bus rider who's ridden up and down Newbern on the bus many, many times for many years, and generally supporter of dense, walkable, sustainable, equitable future for Raleigh. Some of you may know I also serve as the vice chair for the Raleigh Transit Authority, but I wanted to say that I'm speaking today with my own voice and opinions, but as someone who spent a lot of time over the last several years thinking about what bus rapid transit will do for the future of Raleigh. I've spoken in favor of TOD in the past along both the western and southern corridors, and I'm speaking today in favor of it along Newbern as well. And I believe that many of the same good reasons to adopt the forward-thinking changes that are in this comp plan amendment and in the TOD rezoning apply to Newbern too. And that's because I believe that the Transit Overlay District is actually the best tool that we currently have in Raleigh to mitigate the damage that is being caused by redevelopment and gentrification of the single-family neighborhoods in South and East Raleigh. It's the best tool that we have because there are no time machines. I wish there were. But trying to stop change is far from progressive, and we have to change the rules and codes and zoning to be different than the ones that got us into this problem in the first place. Many people in this room know that the current changes are not what are causing gentrification, but instead the displacement issues we're facing have been caused by decades of previously wrong, racist, and classist zoning decisions. Part of the purpose of the Transit Overlay District, of equitable development around transit goals, and the things we're trying to do with bus rapid transit is to undo some of that damage, mitigate those things, and make a different future that won't look like we won't have to have this conversation in 30 more years, in 50 more years. So it's in that vein that I encourage you to move through this process with the attention to detail that you've been giving it. Thank you for considering everything together.
Thank you.
Good Good afternoon. Most of the commission recognizes me from 48 hours ago. My name is Chuck Walker. I'm with Entitlement Preservation Group. I represent a landowner family, the Brewer family, which is on the leading edge, I mean the leading edge of the western edge of this TOD. They own 3 lots that are contiguous, 307, 311, and 325 Eaton Street. For some reason, 325 has not been included in the TOD, and they want to formally request that it be included in the TOD with the other 2 lots. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Tom Baring, professor of architecture at NC State, where I lead the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Initiative. Also serve on the board of Wake Up Wake County. But I'm here as a resident of Mordecai. I live at 811 North Bloodworth Street. So I'm here obviously to support the Transit Overlay District for the Bus Rapid Transit Corridor on New Bern. And the first thing I'd like to observe in debates like this is that it's essential to be clear about what we're all fighting for or what we're fighting against. These are complicated issues, but they get unnecessarily complicated as well. Folks who are fighting for affordable housing, really the crux of that issue is more state and federal funding for construction and rent, or changes to state laws that make it very difficult for cities to build affordable housing. If we're fighting against gentrification, the real fight is reforming the market economy and the market urbanism that drives most development and supporting the capacity of cities to guide it. If we're fighting to preserve the character of neighborhoods, your main target is the national banks and firms that build most of the housing in the U.S., and you should be working to support local home builders and financial institutions. We shouldn't be fighting the Planning Commission on issues that are beyond their control, and these are big issues. When it comes to the TOD overlay at BRTs, the issue is sustainability. I'm fighting to create a sustainable future for my family and future generations. Raleigh, as we all know, is a low-density, auto-dependent city. It's also one of the fastest-growing cities in the U.S. One of the few effective tools cities have to guide growth is zoning. We have a choice: smart growth of multimodal, transit-supportive, compact neighborhoods, or carbon-intensive ones. As stewards of the future, this is our biggest challenge and opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Susan Perry. I'm formerly on the board of Wake Up Wake County and formerly a member of the Board of Education in Wake County. I'm a resident of Raleigh, a business owner here for 41 years, and have spent most of that time living in 2 downtown historic districts. When my family arrived from New York, Raleigh was a categorically different place. With our young children, it was quiet, it was quirky, it was friendly, and sparsely populated. The growth that has happened, revving up beginning in the early 2000s, has been dramatic. It affected our schools, our neighborhoods, the price of housing, as well as the vitality of our community. It's a sign that people want to be here, and it's never been something we were going to be able to turn off. Accommodating that change in the way we channel the physical form our city takes is a huge political challenge, and obviously you guys are saddled with some of that. Considering the alternatives, though, we're very lucky to have that opportunity. I commend Raleigh's leadership for its thoughtful planning and for doing the hard work that's needed to shape and encourage growth in a way that responds to today's needs. Climate change and a new understanding about the way we use space provide us clear signals. The New Bern Avenue branch of a much-needed, fast and efficient public transportation network will set a standard for what comes next. In order to work as a leg of a vital public system, in order to serve a broad variety of people and small businesses, in order to help stem dangerous creep of development into green space outside the city, in order to move people in and out for work and pleasure without using cars, the BRT must have sufficient density along its corridor. Change along the route is going to happen regardless of whether we hold firm on the new zoning that's been recommended. It just won't be the kind of development that we need in order to support an accessible and pedestrian-friendly city. I have grandchildren who I hope will inherit an enlightened and thriving city. It won't be the city that we've known, but I feel pretty certain that most citizens of an earlier era would have been fully on board with plans to support a walkable, climate-friendly, and urban center that responds to today's needs. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Twig, and I'm a long-term resident of the metropolitan area. I'd like to start off with saying I'm not a developer, so I bought the property at 122 Clarendon as my first foray into renovating properties in the area. And I've quickly learned some lessons. The property I bought was unlivable. It had been stripped of its kitchen and bathrooms, and that results in what I would call considerable renovation costs. And unfortunately, that drives the price of a single-family home to the upper end of the market. So when I learned about the TOD, because I did not know that at the time of purchase, I thought it might be better to apply for incorporation into the TOD so alternative plans to a larger single-family house would be more viable. And I think that's supported by your goals, which are, one, affordability, to density around a proposed station, because this property is at the close to the intersection of New Bern and Clarendon Crescent, and allowing different types of housing to be in that area, which is also a stated goal. And polling data showed that from the community as well. I'd like to say that, to be clear, that the property is less than 300 feet from the proposed station, or no, I'm sorry, it's about 500 feet from the proposed station, about a 3-minute walk, and only 60 feet away from the approved TOD as it exists today. So that's my request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll interrupt, Nathan. So just since we had some speakers, Mr. Walker is W26 in your list, so towards the end, and Mr. Twig is M6. So those were specific requests.
What?
26, W26, the 325 Edenton Street. Mr. Twig is 122 Clarendon Crescent, number M6 in the middle stations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ira. Thank you, members of the Planning Commission, and I also want to thank those that have come out from Wake Up Wake County and our supporters in terms of the Transit Overlay District. My name is Nathan Spencer. I'm Executive Director with Wake Up Wake County. I am also a resident in the Longview area, and I'm very excited for the BRT. I have worked tirelessly as a member of the Raleigh Transit Authority to see that the BRT comes in a way that we work to fix the mistakes of the past of cutting off neighborhoods and separating people. The TOD is a big piece of that. It's going to bring people together, but it's also going to allow a certain amount of displacement that won't happen. We're expecting 30,000 new people over the next 10 years into this area, and specifically along that corridor. And those people will buy houses and develop them like they did Swain Street 5 years ago, or the modern home that went for $1.2 million before BRT, before sidewalks, before TOD. That's going to continue happening unless we build an overlay that can put people in a more dense, environmentally friendly, and healthier area that allows us to have more flexibility and the possibility of affordability. It is imperative that we put this together and we carry this forward. It's also imperative because the other corridors depend on it. Our southern corridor contract with the FTA says that we're going to do TOD, and if we back out of it on New Bern, we start to erode that contract and we threaten our federal money. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the community here to speak in favor who have not previously spoken at a meeting? In that case, we'll move to those who are opposed and who have not previously spoken. If you could please introduce yourself with first and last name.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Lauren Johnson. I'm a resident of New Bern Avenue. I live on New Bern Avenue. I too support growth and change is definitely needed and it's exciting. However, I'm concerned that it's happening in front of my house. All of you who just spoke, you're on Edenton, Davie, you're not on Newbern Avenue. Imagine being on Newbern Avenue and you are in a single family home that is at risk of being shoulder to shoulder with high concentrations of people. It's not safe, it's not comfortable, and this is not what we signed up for. We have been living on Newbern Avenue for over 30 years. Our neighbors alike. Dr. Glaubaker, he's spoken to the commissioner, the head of the commissioner, he's spoken with attorneys, he's spoken, my neighbor beside him, Dr. Swan, saying we're all in the same boat. They have gotten very frustrated, however. So they didn't join me tonight because they have been fighting for many years, echoing my same sentiment. This is our home. This is where we live. I understand. You want this and I want it too, but not at my home. So I want that to just kind of resonate, and I want you to empathize. What if this was happening in front of your house? You're losing land, half your land. What if you had a bus going up and down your crepe myrtles that you love driving by every day, looking at every season of change and blooms? You will destroy our community. You will destroy our vision of what is to be for our children and our grandchildren. All of that will be gone for what? For bus rapid transit. I think that's great, but not there. I would like to share, and I don't have time, but facts are showing that ridership is at an all-time low. Nobody's riding the bus as it is, and we will lose a lot of money for BRT when nobody's existingly riding the bus. Wish I had more time. Have a lot more to say.
Thank you.
I'll say, Ms. Johnson was submitted on M4, the request for the middle station, so she lives at.
Could you email us by chance? Submit your comments to us by email.
Hello, I'm Eric Johnson. I am also on New Bern Avenue. We've been there since about 90, and my families have been in North Carolina since, well, even before the 1800s. And North Carolina is not like San Francisco, New York, Maryland, Chicago. It was not traditionally one of those big, bustling, high-density cities. Its attraction is low density, having some peace and quiet and being able to go outside barefoot and yell. Yeah, we've had problems, racial problems. We've had a lot of those problems. We were fixing some of them, but we brought in so many new problems, we kind of put all that on hold. So I live on New Bern right now. Right now between Pear Tree and maybe Clarendon, Raleigh Boulevard, it's all residential between Pear Tree and Clarendon. All low-density residential on New Bern. A lot of us saved up. We did a lot to get there so we could have our peace and quiet. And right now, our biggest problems are the dirt bikes and four-wheelers that do wheelies up and down, and the police don't chase them. After about 9, 10 o'clock, we have every hot rod that wants to do about 100 miles an hour down New Bern, and we have no enforcement happening. We used to have police that would sit down in the morning on the motorcycles and they would just get billions of tickets. They would get as many tickets as they want. But for some reason, that has stopped. We need that back. We need that enforcement. Because it's residential, it's currently 45 where my driveway starts. Me and my wife have been hit turning in and out of the driveway. It's horrible. It's unbelievable. People come over that hill, and we need to have a warning sign. Driveways coming up, there's no warning sign. But people come over the hill, and they just passed the hospital at 35, and they floor it now. They figure, it's highway, I can get on it. And it's very dangerous to come over that hill. So we'll come out the driveway, look up to the hill, no cars, pull out, and then, I didn't, I'm sorry. Well, that one thought was with BRT, we're in support of BRT and overlays in the right areas. So maybe like a block or two back where it is already high density. With BRT, we like BRT, but we want the U-turns to stay. We want the speed limit to be safe for us to get in and out of the driveway. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Michael Sutton, and I live on East Edenton Street, and I will be directly across from the BRT bus station. And I'm okay with that, because the truth is we're not really opposed to the BRT, and the truth is we're not really opposed to the TOD. It's how it's been applied. And the reason why we're here is because a year and a half ago, city planners told us in their presentation that areas not suited to the TOD include areas zoned with NCODs, HODs, and Raleigh historic landmarks. And yet that's exactly what we did. That's why we're here. City planners mapped the TOD over our NCOD. The TOD is not compatible with the rules of the NCOD. You cannot conserve a neighborhood by superseding with different rules. City planners mapped the TOD over a Raleigh historic landmark. And just for good measure, city planners are rezoning HOD properties to include uses like bars and nightclubs. This includes a property that is used for transitional housing for addicts. Where else in Raleigh do you want these people in their neighborhood? This is what happens when you plan on paper without walking our streets and understanding our neighborhoods. This has been hid behind popular topics of mass transit and affordable housing, and completed the work without meaningful input until the very end. The problem isn't the TOD, the problem isn't the BRT, it's the map. Send them back and change the map. City planners have said that TOD impacts the minimal amount of neighborhoods over the length of the TOD corridor. If that is true, the inverse is true. Removing the neighborhoods would have a minimal impact on the TOD. Change the map. City planners have said a wild amount of things regarding TOD's impact on affordable housing. It has not been supported by evidence and begins with comments, "we think." They're asking you to remove property rights of historically black neighborhoods for an experiment. And the last thing I want to say is that the number one egregious thing is that the TOD is needed for the BRT. The BRT is going to happen, and the BRT, our city planners, our city council has already said that the BRT's goal is to connect to other towns. This is not local transit. This is not about walking neighborhoods to the BRT. This is about connecting the BRT to places like Garner and Clayton and Knightdale and places without the density. They've already told us this. So why are we erasing our neighborhoods for places like that? Thank you.
Thank you.
To continue interrupting, Mr. Sutton is W19 on your list, your bingo card.
Lisa Hewitt, and I am going to compliment some of the speakers like Mike Sutton and Professor of Architecture over there. This really isn't bus rapid transit. I come from an area in Wisconsin where we had rapid transit, and that included parking areas so people could actually park their car and go. When you have this many stops, it's not bus rapid transit. In fact, we're spending, I don't know how much this project is going to cost, but you're only saving 10 minutes to go from point A to point B. That's not rapid transit. And you're going to ruin a lot of these people's daily lives. I want to know how the city can come and rezone my property. I call that eminent domain. So if you're putting a TOD over my property, that's not right. Only a property owner can initiate a rezoning, okay? You can't do it for businesses that are nuisance businesses. And the other thing is, even if they did, they'd be grandfathered in. So why aren't NCODs, HODs, the existing property owners grandfathered in? If that's the case, put TOD everywhere. One other comment that I'll make is with regard to affordable housing. This is not affordable housing. And I hate to state it to you guys, but gentrification, with or without the BRT, is going to continue to happen because there is nothing that the city can do without lobbying the NCGA to change their discriminatory laws to allow more affordable housing. And we need federal dollars. Otherwise, developers are going to max out their profits. So they're going to build rentals. And that's not generational wealth. That's an apartment building where they're getting $4,000, all right, over time. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hua Huang. I actually live near Lake Wheeler Road, but I am here to speak against BRT. I've been working with Ms. Octavia Rainey, and I've observed with her how the bus route goes along the New Bern Avenue. Most of the people who take buses is because they need to take those buses to work. There are people who are low income, people from the Black community, and if there's no protection put in place to ensure they don't get displaced, and I know right now as we speak there is no protection in place for the Black community in the area, then you're basically pushing them out, and so these people who work in Raleigh have to now drive to Raleigh to work. So you're not actually solving the problem of making sure more people can actually live where they work. You're actually just moving people around, and ultimately, as at the end of the day, you're still these are the people who need to drive, and some of them may not be able to afford cars because they're low income. And the other thing I want to bring up is from the way we look at it, is this BRT as we speak is basically bringing the essence of downtown to New Bern Avenue, and I've seen the way downtown is it is extremely racist. It is hostile to Black folks. So bringing that into New Bern Avenue, and I know that that's happening because the police chief is already saying that they're going to increase surveillance at the area. So in more ways than one, all this infrastructure is happening is basically a form of violence in multiple angles against Black community as we speak. So if you don't have protection put in place for them, then this should not go through. That's what I would say. Also, I just want to make one quick note. Since this is in recording, let the record show the racial demographic of people who speak for and speak against this rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amber Nimmix. I live at 504 Mosley Lane, which is about half a block off of Edenton. My family's been there for about 18 years, and we were fortunate to benefit from the city's redevelopment zone there, which made it possible for us to live downtown. And it's been a terrific community to be a part of. I'm afraid of the TOD because it incentivizes the eradication of homes and communities up and down New Bern and Edenton. And there exists in these communities some of what Raleigh needs most, which is low income and missing middle housing. The thing that I think that Raleigh needs most is already there in a lot of these cases. And in its place, we want to see a bunch of high-rise, high-density apartments and condominiums. But these are going to be built for people who can afford to live there. As the speaker before me was saying, people who ride the bus generally won't be able to afford to live in the places that are going to go up now where there are homes where people who ride the bus can afford to live. The people who move into these high-rise apartments, I do not see them parking their cars and taking the bus. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, maybe we would have this massive culture shift where people who can afford these giant, condominiums would all of a sudden park their cars and start riding the bus, but that doesn't seem likely. I think that this is mostly a good plan if you want to build a high-rise condominium along this route, because as has been noted before, the city doesn't really have any way to meaningfully encourage low-income and missing middle housing to be built along this corridor. So it's not going to happen. Gentrification is going to continue. It's just going to continue in a different shape, which is going to be detrimental to the people who already live there and to the communities that thrive along this corridor. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak who did not get to speak the last meeting? And is everyone here to speak in opposition? Opposition? Is there anyone here that would like to speak in favor who spoke at the last meeting? Okay, in that case, we will open the floor. Thank you.
My name is Octavia Rainey. I have lived in College Park all my life. That's a total of 68 years. I led the rezoning effort for College Park from an R20 to an R10. We do not, Nathan, want our neighborhood rezoned. I heard the speeches. All of y'all are white speaking. You don't even know the history of College Park. You don't know the history. How can you speak about something you don't know? I want to refresh your memory. On the corner of Raleigh Boulevard and Pool Road, it has flooded for 15 years. Corey Branch said, when we bring in the BRT, we're going to fix it. Why you have to fix it now when you bring in the BRT? Haven't black people suffered enough? You talk about injustices? There's a lot of injustices that happen in College Park. A lot. The city have an analysis of impediment. That's supposed to look at barriers, white barriers to black barriers. They have not did that since 1988. What you talking about? There's something wrong with that picture. Even Tansy said the city is not under a federal mandate to do 30%. How you gonna get that in the TOD? Black people ride the bus at extreme hardships. That bus service is terrible. Down there at Moore Square, they don't even have any heat in the wintertime. Black people have to wrap up in blankets. Do you know that we love our rezoning and R10? How dare the city? Because they have the right to do that, don't mean that they should do it. You have all those plans for New Bern Avenue, and I challenge that. It's a bunch of hogwash. Even he said it out his own mouth, that we're going to stop big cars riding down New Bern Avenue. He tried to change it up and make it sound something else, but it was the truth, targeting black drivers. I'm sick of this now. I don't support no TOD, period. And Nathan, you and your little white group, y'all shouldn't either.
Thank you.
Chris Crew, 306 Elm Street. I've been a resident of Oakwood since 1975 when it was an undesirable neighborhood, and I've watched it change. And I want to say that throughout this entire process, one single vision has been presented as the sure and only outcome: fast, efficient bus service linking densely populated urbanized areas with affordable housing. There is nothing to indicate that we're going to get affordable housing out of this. There's a lot to indicate that we are going to lose naturally occurring affordable housing. There's no bandwidth whatsoever given to other possible outcomes of this TOD, including loss of historic structures and neighborhoods, dissolution of local culture and heritage, and dissipation of generational wealth. The whole force behind this has been to make things easy and profitable for developers and builders who don't have a local interest or stake in this. Out with the old ideas, out with the old culture, out with the old customs, out with the old habits. You know who said that? Look that up. People don't want art commemorating neighborhoods that are lost. They want to preserve and nurture the thriving and diverse neighborhoods that make Raleigh a desirable place to live. Do away with this wholesale upzoning practice and make developers work with the existing zoning and land use planning. We worked hard for 10 years on our plan, on our, citizens participated in this process and came up with the zoning we have. So we don't want to commemorate with art our lost culture and heritage. We want the actual heritage. Honor our neighborhoods, honor our culture, honor our heritage, and honor our history. These are the foundations of the communities, and these are the things that distinguish Raleigh from other cities of 500,000 and other urban areas of 1.5 million. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking at the time, we are taking public comment until 5:20, so we have time for exactly one more speaker. Thank you.
Well, that was timing. Curtis Case Fang. I am on the Raleigh Historic Districts Commission, or Historic Development Commission. You received our recommendation against approving the TOD rezoning because of the impacts on the historic structures, which are inconsistent with the comp plan. When I last spoke to you, I talked about the Section 106 review, which was incomplete. That was the basis for funding the BRT. The Section 106 review basically found there were no impacts on historic structures, even though a large portion of the historic structures, even in the TOD rezoning, are impacted adversely by being rezoned to be torn down, basically. What that did is that resulted in what's called a de minimis finding on the Section 4 funding for the transportation money. So that is all happening based on a Section 106 review that ignored city policy that was in place at the time of the review. And staff here has gone ahead and followed that policy. So they're kind of confirming that the policy existed and they're heading in the wrong direction by doing it. What I'm asking as a citizen, not as a district's commissioner, is that you recommend that City Council push this to the Transportation and Transit Committee because of these issues, and that they table the rezoning until they can correct the Section 106 review and come up with an MOA and adjust the TOD rezoning to accommodate it. Because if you pass it, there's no going back, right? You can't take from people some rights you've given them as part of that rezoning. That's my request. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. 5:20, so that was the end of public comment. But as we bring this item back to the table for discussion, we will first talk about the comp plan amendments with an aim towards advancing the ball on clarifying issues and identifying potential changes that staff could make and accomplish prior to our next meeting. We'll then turn to the rezoning cases. So turning first to the comp plan, I'd like to kick us off with a question for staff. Could you provide us more information on what methodology was used to create this TOD buffer area along the corridor?
So the actual the transit overlay district itself?
Yes.
Sure. Let me pull it up. Well, I would say for starters, the conclusion of the New Bern Station Area Plan, which was a long range, like an area plan, had a matrix of implementation steps. One of them was this rezoning, and so the consultant team working on that project gave us a preliminary idea of where that rezoning would be effective. It was a much more basic map. It was just the TOD, I believe, and some height recommendations. So the true start was the plan. I would say that once that concluded and we started the official rezoning process, we do try to treat things as sort of, I don't want to say fairly, but similarly, properties are treated similarly, I would say. So we did have a sort of similar to the bullets I walked through for my recommendations. We had a list of criteria, which I have called in public an algorithm. I want to be clear that a computer didn't do it. When I used the vocabulary word algorithm, I meant the bullets on page 5 that we wrote that I looked at. And so our internet is very slow. But in the old business, in the staff report for the rezoning has the list. It was prioritizing properties on New Bern Avenue, properties zoned mixed use. So it was avoiding properties in a residential district unless they were the only ones on New Bern Avenue. So there was like a sort of in order priority of what's included. Properties in certain future land use map categories, generally one block from New Bern or Edenton in terms of where the New Bern Edenton pair was. There were a couple of instances we avoided because the existing entitlement was already maxed out because of some other regulation that was not zoning. So Again, we try to not be as misleading when we
Sure,
can
so
avoid
just to
it.
clarify, as part of the process, it's my understanding that sort of the first broad brush was to look at sort of a specific radius.
Right.
Is it a quarter mile from the?
1/4 mile, right.
1/4 mile? And then, so that happened first, and are you saying that the area planning process informed the details of where the boundaries were and continued to change it?
Yeah, so the area plan resulted, that was their instructions to the consultant, was we were looking at a 1/4 mile and all of the other planning work that we've been doing. So they did not propose anything to us that was farther than that away, for sure.
Understood.
I didn't want to imply that they started with nothing. We did have parameters that we gave them when we were asking to give us a map of where to start, yeah.
And so have significant changes been made since then with respect to the 1/4 mile?
No, so occasionally for large properties, the property itself might exceed that because it's very deep and might be longer than a 1/4 mile in length. So we do not partially zone properties. So that is particularly true outside the Beltline. The properties get pretty large. So some of these might be larger than a 1/4 mile, for example. But generally, no. I mean, a 1/4 mile inside the Beltline is 4 or 5 blocks, I want to say.
Gotcha. But as a general matter, the map still designates the transit overlay district essentially for just a 1/4 mile north and south, or just along New Bern Avenue. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was, it was not strictly, I don't remember every single measurement. So there is this, on Pool Road, this triangle area that ends at Lord Anson Drive. I don't want to say I know for sure that is 1/2 mile or a 1/4 or whatever, but generally we were looking at the block as a good rule of thumb, the 1 block on New Bern Avenue.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's helpful in understanding the process and also sort of guiding some of our thinking as we perhaps come in with more of a scalpel and looking at individual properties. Any other thoughts and comments from commissioners on that topic?
Yeah, I have a question. There's a number of ones on here that are requests to be removed by their single respective property owners, right? So there's a bunch that are requests to be removed and were denied. But the ones that stand out to me on here are ones that are just single lots by their owners. I believe the ones I'm talking about are M5, M8, M9, M10.
I just want to say, for just trying to stay organized for this meeting, we are definitely going to go through each individual request, but if you have a question about sort of what the process was.
Yeah, so I'll get to it. That is what I'm asking about. W12, W19, and then W20 through 23 all appear to be kind of in that category. And I'm just curious what the process or why, what the reasoning those were denied from removing. So, sorry,
sure.
Were denied for removal, being that their owners were requesting it for just their own properties.
Yeah, so I don't deny anything. I'm recommending,
Gotcha.
and you also recommend. I just want to be clear to the public. So I think we do want to treat or think about all the properties similarly. So I do understand your point that this is one person asking. I think for me, who is not only considering that, but also honestly considering every single property, if the intent of the rezoning was to allow more types of development along New Bern Avenue, and sometimes only directly on New Bern Avenue, sometimes farther away, as we've discussed, for as much of it as we can, and especially things that are very close to stations. So not to single anyone out, but since my slide is here. So for example, we did manage to add these requests to the viewer for you all to pan around in. So while you are right, like this person who is at the corner of Lord Ashley represents one person. If I were to try to objectively think of that from a planning perspective, I don't know why that property is different than the property across the street on the west side. So I do acknowledge that, and there are a lot of individual requests that we get where the other person on the other side might say, I do want to be in, and they have a very similar piece of property in a similar situation. But based on the criteria I had and thinking about like how I would think about that type of property along the corridor, you know, if I were to say you should accept this request, then why wouldn't I say that you should just remove all of these properties, right? Which is clearly not the intent of the rezoning. So I don't want to make a sort of slippery slope argument. I think that's a little bit too far for me to make that point. But I think the bottom line is we had the criteria of what was included in the first place, and how we looked at each request based on other policy to ultimately come to each one. Now, you know, you are welcome to make a counter recommendation to council, and they are welcome to disagree with me and zone as they will. But
Can I
is
ask
that helpful? I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah. Can I ask a quick follow-up to that? Did any of those requested removals, because it doesn't show reasoning for the request for removal. I guess we heard one or two here tonight, but like, as we know, like if you're R4 and you get rezoned to RX5, like your property taxes are going to go way, way, way up when there's a revaluation. You know, if someone requested that for like, and a lot of people in this part of the city have trouble affording their property taxes. And that's why I asked the question. If anyone requested for literal like tax affordability's sake, would that be reconsidered? And like, are those requests, is the reasoning for those requests made public, basically?
So they're all, for the most part, and this is the reason why we were directing people to use the online portal, they're all attached. So a lot of time you could find the person, if some people posted anonymously, some people didn't, but you can usually find the address. And sometimes they wrote at length about their reasoning, and sometimes they didn't. Generally, the planning department doesn't consider land value very much for rezoning. We don't rezone things to make them more valuable or less valuable. Our land use policy is independent of that. I'm not saying you can't think of that, and council doesn't think of that for sure. But in my 5 years of doing rezoning work in Raleigh, I've never considered property taxes from a rezoning point of view. We do understand and have heard that a lot through the process that is a real concern for people. On the comp plan amendment side, we are telling city council there are multiple actions in that telling them to try and do better to help people who can't afford their property taxes. Absolutely. We are limited sometimes in what the state will let us do, but we think we can be doing more. But from the zoning side, I am pretty intently not trying to think about that. But again, if that's important to you and important to council, I'm not going to dissuade you from thinking about that.
Cool. Yeah, and I know that's probably a thing that will come up later. I just wanted to...
People have said it, absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask at this stage. Thanks.
Absolutely. And I would just wanted to reassure everyone, as a matter of process, we will go through each and every individual request in some detail, and I believe we all have to vote on each specific.
That's up to you. I mean, we can organize it different ways.
Okay. Well, I think we can batch them as under certain policies and then perhaps look at them.
I think that was the idea.
Yeah, thank you. I think you organized them very well for us, and I appreciate that. So in that same vein, I'm very interested to talk about the comp plan and the criteria that we're going to use to look at some of those, sort of the whole project, the project as a whole, and then any specific individual case. I know that in some cities, instead of the TOD corridor being merely, sort of a radius of the actual line, it actually instead sort of looks more, as some might say, like a boa constrictor that has sort of a large area around a station, and then little to no TOD overlay until the next station. And looking at this map and where that applies, a lot of the concerns are not necessarily right around the stations, but along the lines themselves, not at the station. So that may be able to address a lot of the concerns the neighbors have at this time. Is that something that the city has reviewed or considered?
Yeah, I will say for New Bern Avenue specifically, not speaking for every the design, the station locations for the other corridors that are in the play. There is basically always a quarter mile. You're never more than a quarter mile from a station, except for one chunk of the corridor, which is roughly Dickens Drive, so I have it on the screen here, in Longview Gardens. There was the preliminary station, there was a station that has since been removed from the plan, so there was going to be full coverage of quarter mile walking. So at most, you're a quarter mile from one way or the other. In the final station location design, the final corridor design, that is not true for what on this screen is showing as M4, but roughly Longview Lake Drive. So we did not map the TOD there, to your point, because it was outside a quarter mile. So there is a bit of the corridor where the station spacing is larger, but otherwise, there is quarter mile access everywhere. Now, I do want to be clear that that does stop at the Beltline. There are not stations, full stations. There are stops. They're a little bit less in terms of infrastructure, but I believe the same is true that they're still a quarter mile.
A quarter mile from the station, not from the corridor.
Right. Yeah. The stations are half a mile from each other, which means their quarter mile circles overlap. So if you're in between one, you have a quarter mile either way to go, if that makes sense.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you. Except that there are some of those stations that have less infrastructure, and those are just along the Beltline?
Outside the Beltline, they turn from full BRT stations to more enhanced bus stops. So they don't have a raised platform, for example. They are still the BRT bus, and I wonder if Head is going to look at me sternly if I'm doing that right. Okay, great. So the full, inside the Beltline, there will be a raised platform, so you board like a level boarding, like a train. There you pay ahead of time at a kiosk. I don't think there are, they do have that outside? Okay, Head can tell me. But the stations themselves are smaller outside the Beltline.
Okay.
They're sort of midway between a station and a stop, is how I would say it, but.
Thank you. Sure.
There's the actual transit path. Yeah. Thank you.
So the difference really is that outside of the Beltline on the NCDOT corridor, the speed limit increases. And so for the stations themselves, we have to be outside of the clear zone that NCDOT requires. And so we can't afford to have the level boarding there because that is an NCDOT requirement. That has to be the level 6-inch curb that's everywhere else. But it will have all of the amenities that are on the stations inside of the Beltline as well. So it would have the ticket vending machine still, it would still have a canopy, it would still have real-time arrival signs, it would still have everything else that the stations inside will, it will just be slightly smaller in size and farther pushed back. So the sidewalk would come in front. I see another question.
Yes.
Question.
Commissioner
Since you're up there,
Yes.
could you talk about the two speeds?
Yeah, so outside the Beltline, it is 45 miles per hour. There are stretches inside the Beltline. Because we're adding the median running transitway, we're getting separation from the speeds. Even if there may be a speed that's 35 or 45 inside the Beltline, we have enough clear zone from the general travel lanes to allow for the station's designs to be the way they are.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners on that topic?
On the BRT.
And just sort of the design of the corridor itself and how it was drawn. Okay. Thank you. Moving on to other questions and comments from the commissioners. Who would like to kick us off?
I will.
Sure.
Thank you. Are we talking about the comprehensive plan amendment or the rezoning?
Yes, let's focus on the comprehensive plan amendments.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you, Ira, for addressing my comments from the last time.
I tried.
I appreciate it. So my concerns are primarily related to anti-displacement policies. Because as we've been told, the BRT is coming. So I want to make sure when it comes, we have strong policies in place, at least as strong as we can do with the restrictions we have from the state to try to mitigate the impact of gentrification and displacement as much as we can. The maps that you showed at the beginning showed that the area is already gentrifying. I mean, you noted that it was already, the median income was rising and the area was becoming less diverse. So that's happening. It's tough to stop that ball once it starts rolling. But that's the focus of my questions and my comments, is to just make sure I understand what we as a city are doing in our policies to try to stem that tide as much as we can. So I looked at the section on anti-displacement. And is it possible to use it used to be called the Equity Fund, what the Public Project
ma'am.
Community
Support Fund.
Support Fund, to give grants or some sort of relief to legacy residents whose property taxes are going to increase as a result of a rezoning? Could that fund, or is there some other funding available to the city that could be used to help residents pay that difference, at least for a certain amount of time?
Yep. Yeah, so I would say we think, and by we I mean the staff who worked on the project, think there is more room. So working within state law, that there is more room to offer assistance of that kind. I think in the comp plan amendment, I'm going to do a search for tax. Action number 3, to expand homeowner cost assistance, low-income homeowner cost assistance tax relief. So there's a sentence, but behind that is a lot of discussion we've had with our partners in Wake County about what options are available to us. So Wake County does have some programs that are pretty limited. There you have to be a veteran, I think, or I don't remember. Persons with a disability or something. They have a couple of programs. And so I think from a staff level, the conversation has been there might be some more options we can have. I think this is an attempt to get City Council to, approve this action and then have us go work on it and think what we can do. And there will, of course, be money needed for that to happen, whether that is the Community Support Fund, which is the way it's set up now as a pilot, is targeted to communities near large, impactful infrastructure projects. So to date, there are 2. It's this one, New Bern Avenue, BRT, and Dix Park, Dorothea Dix Park. So potentially there, potentially some other source. I think part of that is to be determined. We know there are some things we definitely can't do from state law, but from planning staff point, our understanding and research and work that we've done, not only do we know it's a need, but we think there's probably some more creative solutions for that we would like to continue to try and look at. So, I mean, part of the benefit for staff from an area plan like this and getting something into the comprehensive plan, it is a time where we put stuff in front of council and say, here's a list of stuff that we think you should do, and they say approved. That is then confirmation for us to keep going and try and do all this stuff. So that is certainly the intent. I know there's not a lot of detail in the single sentence that winds up in the comp plan, but that is the goal of at least that particular action.
And there's some language also about, excuse me, encouraging affordable housing at deep levels, 30%, 60%. Could that be, and maybe it is, let me know if it is, but could that be prioritized along this corridor or the
Yes,
four
yeah.
BRT?
I think there's also a policy, something that says we should be spending so much of our bond money on just New Bern Avenue, prioritizing New Bern Avenue over in the short term, in general. But yeah, as has been said, it has not been city policy to fund very much affordable housing at the 30% level. Totally true. I think part of this is saying that we should do more of that. Now, everything's a trade-off, right? So the more housing that's had deeper affordability, you can build fewer of those because each one costs you more than one that is not quite as subsidized. So at some point, there is a discussion of value, right? Like, do you want to help 10 families at this much or 3 families at this much? That is the choice, right, in terms of where the dollars get spent. I don't want to say one value is right or wrong. I think that is the discussion to have as a city. Historically, we have valued, helping more people over as where possible. So we have prioritized the 60% level because the deals that get done at the tax credits, I'm not going to try and get out of my zone too much about affordable housing finance, but that's not to say that we can't do deeper affordability. We can. It just would require that discussion and the shift of priorities. I think the actions in here are trying to get that sort of ball rolling to say we should have that. We should look at what that would take, the resources that we are spending, should they be spent differently? And this is recommending that some of that is at the deeper affordability level on New Bern Avenue, and probably as the other corridors come on through their planning process, we'll say something similar. In fact, that might be on the corridor-wide one. But yeah, I fully acknowledge we haven't done a lot of that as a city, and part of those actions are to try to get us to consider to do more of that.
And keep going.
Yes, please. I was going to say on that one, did you have any recommendations to change the language? And maybe that was more towards Commissioner Bennett's point. Instead of just dedicating funding for deepest affordability, were you talking specifically about prioritizing that, looking at
Well, I wanted
prioritizing?
to know if we could prioritize it. I mean, I don't have specific language because I know there are limitations that I might not be aware of, but I wanted to know if we could emphasize prioritizing it. Like you mentioned that there is a policy about dedicating so much of the bond money to the New Bern Avenue corridor. Does that specify how it's going to be spent?
No, it's just saying that of the programs that the bond is funding, geographically it should be for X number of years, that X percent of the bond should be on New Bern Avenue.
Is it possible to put some specificity?
Well, if you would like me to try to bring you language to look at, I'd be happy to do that. If there are things that are of interest in particular,
Well,
don't just put you on the spot. You're welcome to,
Well, I mean,
to think about
I
it and tell me.
think
but-
I'm trying to look at you and talk
know,
on the
I'm
mic at the
sorry.
same time, but we are hearing that people are concerned about affordability and like real affordability at levels, at lower income levels.
Yes, ma'am.
And so if we can show that we are prioritizing that in our policies and our supporting actions, I think it at least shows that the city is trying to address this concern about displacement for existing residents. Because I want the policy to show that we care about the people who are living along New Bern Avenue now. That's not to say we don't want newcomers, we don't want other people to come, but I want it to show that we're committed to the people who are living and working along New Bern Avenue now being able to continue to live and work along New Bern Avenue if that's their choice. And so wherever we can add language to show that we're prioritizing our investments to somehow protect and preserve the legacy residents, that's what I would be interested
Okay.
in seeing.
Yep. I'd be happy to bring back some new stuff or revised stuff. If you're,
That would be great. I was going to say, under the current for deepest affordable housing, it's for all station areas generally.
great.
Transit station areas citywide, so perhaps this could come under specifically the New Bern Avenue corridor recommendations regarding preventing displacement, specifically for treating this area differently when exploring prioritizing deepest affordability along this corridor.
Sure. Yeah, I would be happy to work on that before the next meeting and potentially talk to you further about it, so I know I'm on the right track of what you were looking for. Yeah.
If I may.
Please.
What may be helpful in that conversation would be the deep income targeting that was proposed and as part of the Raleigh Affordable Housing Bond through not only the low income housing tax credit program, but I'm also looking at the public-private partnership activity in conjunction with the housing affordability target maps that use the BRT overlay, or sorry, the New Bern Avenue overlay there, which is supposed to provide guidance to staff who's administering the bond proceeds, which has this language of targeting 30% area median income, should be applicable to that area. So I think those two should go hand in hand.
Sure.
Correct?
I think so. I'm not quite as up to speed on the affordable housing, the orange map. I forget the official title. Housing location policy. Thank you. But yeah, I can certainly look into that.
And then I think also to that end, the tax incentive programs to help cover the real estate tax burdens associated for folks with low income in a rising tax rate environment. Additionally, the bond also is helping support owner-occupied rehab programs.
Right.
And first-time payment assistance, which I believe the first-time payment assistance is also targeted in that orange or New Bern Avenue. So I think all of that is supportive of the preservation of housing affordability.
Yeah, I will. That's a great point. So like, we can't always help directly with taxes in particular, but we do know that a lot of folks who have trouble paying taxes have trouble paying for other things. And there are other programs that we have and that are also recommended to be increased here for other costs of homeownership. So even though we can't always directly help you pay your taxes, if we can make owning your home in general more affordable, it does help you pay your taxes because you're spending less on other things. So there are some recommendations for that, for directing those programs that exist already here and also larger. A lot of that is federal money, so there are requirements, but
Another potential opportunity, just to offer ideas, would be in the voucher program for affordable housing, if there's any opportunity to incentivize voucher. I don't know, but I'm throwing out ideas.
Thank you. And I also just wanted to clarify on the property tax issue. It's my understanding that the tax assessor does not actually consider underlying rezoning for tax purposes. Is that correct? It's just
I'm not a tax professional. I think for the most part, it is the price of what someone's willing to pay for your land based on what people have paid for land elsewhere and the value of your building. I think at some point there is the zoning district factors in there somewhere. I do believe it's not. I don't think the largest single component of your valuation. But I'm not a real estate appraiser, so I don't want to go too far down how the county does that.
Could we research that before the next meeting?
I think the secret formula for how that works is probably going to be secret for reasons of gaming the system, for legitimate reasons of the process. They have, I think, the public the information about what Wake County takes into consideration is public, and that's probably what is going to be what's most public.
Okay.
That was an inelegant way of saying that, but.
Thank you. Any other comments on the changes to the comprehensive plan or that have already been made or new ones?
I have one thing. So in the comprehensive plan, there's a density bonus. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm looking at it here. It looks like if you go from 3 stories to 5 stories, it'll essentially give you 2 other stories if you do 20% of that building. Sorry, not of the building, of just the additional units, so the 2 extra stories at the 60% AMI level for a minimum of 30 years. When I look at the overlay, there's not much 3-story there. And it seems like just not a lot of opportunities for that density bonus to be applied.
So the bonus gives you whatever your height is, it allows you to go up to 50% taller than that. So in the example of 3, half of 3 is 1.5, and we round up to 2, so 5. If the zoning is 5, you can go up to 8. So the bonus is always there wherever the transit overlay exists, and it's just multiplying by 50% whatever the zoning is. So we are doing both things in a lot of cases in this rezoning request, not everywhere, but in a lot of cases. we're saying the zoning itself should be 5, and then there's also a bonus to go higher to 6 or 7 or 8.
Okay, so I guess my part 2 to that is that formula, 20% of units at 60% AMI, I mean, how, what would that take to, I guess, strengthen that? I mean, is that something that council has to do? Is it something that planning staff can do? What is that process?
So that would be a change to the district, which everything in zoning is council.
Right.
Comp plan 2. So that number was derived when we, in 2018, 2019, when we were developing it, from a pretty extensive market research about what we thought would make sense for someone to build and take advantage of the bonus. So it's voluntary, right? We can't force people to do it. So it's got to pencil out that they're not paying more for those affordable units than they would otherwise pay for the building. They'll just build shorter. So at the time, based on the market, those were the numbers we thought would make it a viable solution that people would actually use. I think it still has not been on the street in very many places, right? It's been in Western and Southern. We haven't seen a lot of projects take many, many years to go through. So it's possible that those numbers could be made more aggressive in the future. Yes, I think it's possible. The other thing is true too, which no one does it. I think we tried to target what we seemed realistic, that someone would, not everybody, but enough people would use it, that it would actually see some units. If it turns out we undershot and every single person wants to use it, then absolutely we would suggest that become either more units or more affordability or what have you.
I should have looked this up before we came today. I'm sorry. Are you aware of any municipalities, any examples the TOD bonus for affordable housing has been implemented, that we could look at success stories or rates of adoption?
So, affordable housing bonuses do exist across the country. Some states can do it mandatory, inclusionary housing. It's just not voluntary. They make you do it. That is not the case in North Carolina, but voluntary ones do exist. I know we did a lot of research about them. I was not super involved in that. I can go back and look at the examples. I don't know how many of them were directly tied to transit. I think that is becoming more and more common as more and more cities develop transit this way.
I'm kind of interested in it as a separate phenomena, like what kind of, are the economic incentives there to get developers to pick up on these bonuses? And you're welcome to follow up and bring it back, but now that's on my list, I'll be looking into it.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I can go back to the original material. I think the bonus was designed for the transit overlay district. We knew this is where it was going to live. It's not a bonus anywhere else in the code. So I do think that was a factor, but again, that was not my project. I don't remember the details.
I'll also point out to the commission and everybody here that the TOD can be implemented as part of a standalone zoning process. And we've seen that happen a couple times, so it's on the corridor for this case, but it doesn't mean it's always going to be on the corridor.
Thank you. Other comments about the comp plan changes?
Regarding the density bonus, I'm sorry, how many years has it been in action now?
So the Western and Southern were the first ones to map it. That was in 2019 cases, I think. 2020. Yeah.
1 year, okay. Yeah, nothing would be built, but we've had applicants? Okay. Yeah, that would be really terrific. And then to that point about, tweaking, that 20%, again, is because a unit costs the same, whether you do affordable or you do regular market rate, but you lose money on the affordable, and sometimes it's so much so you can't even pay for that construction, so you have to have the other offset it. Maybe 20% in this market is not the right number. Like, maybe we could look at, what would trigger greater incentive for application. If we've tried it for a year and we've had one application, maybe we need to think about the number. If we had 20 applications, again,
right. I think that was the
opposite effect.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the idea when we pitched it.
Okay.
I think, from my point of view, it's still just yesterday. It's been, in terms of the life cycle of a development.
Right.
And I think what I meant by strengthen it is like, if you only get 2 more stories, for example, in in RX3, for example. They only get 2 more stories, and that's only adding, and no one's using it, and it would only put 20% in there if they did use it. I don't know. I guess my idea would be, why not start lower and give this way more stories? And then possibly you can increase that percentage while also giving more stories. Just a thought.
Yeah, there are certainly multiple levers you can pull for what the final result is. I think, understanding that the bonus was also not meant to be replace all rezonings requests necessarily. So there are certainly always going to be projects who want to do something very different or much taller. It was meant to be relatively fit in the context, so 50% increase, not doubling or tripling or anything. And with the other numbers that we thought financially would make sense and be appealing enough that we would get enough applicants. So,
Thank you. Commissioner Raines?
Cool.
Just a quick question for Mr. Mabel. On CP 1122, the Affordable Housing Policy Map, if you can just kind of clarify for us and the audience, the New Bern corridor was indicated as a geographic appendage, if you will, for the overall map inclusion. Could you explain how the city applies that map to this corridor for additional funding focus?
Sure.
So we have high bonus options for developers, and we also still include this.
So this is the existing map. This is not the map that was approved. Was that? Oh, I'm not sharing. I don't know if that's because there is a map in the comprehensive plan, as I try to get that to work, called the Affordable Housing Location Policy. That is a policy that housing in neighborhoods relies on to avoid segregation, to be blunt. So like always putting affordable housing in the same part of the city where it's where it's easiest to build. So Southeast Raleigh, speaking very generally, is absent from that map because it already has a high amount of affordable housing. There are exceptions to that, which is where transit access is really high. So there's like basically the same buffer that is the half mile, I think, quarter mile, maybe half mile, I don't remember, on New Bern Avenue on Saunders Street. Because there's always, in planning, everything's a trade-off, right? So there's the goal of not putting all of the affordable housing in the same part of town is important and valuable, but also putting affordable housing where people who live in it have very good access to very good transit is also a very important goal. So there is an exception for the BRT, which will have the highest level of transit anywhere, even though that part of town is more affordable than other places where we should be focusing or avoiding concentrating. The value of the transit in terms of the life of someone who needs housing assistance is such that we think it's worth the trade-off there. So I don't know what the map that's being updated. I presume that exception is in place the same way, but that is the thinking.
Thanks for the clarification.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments from yes, Commissioner Bennett?
I had a lot of questions, but we're obviously not going to get to them. I'll try to just do the most important ones. So there's TOD, and then there's ETOD, equitable TOD. I'm trying to focus on the E, the equitable TOD, since we have the equitable development around transit guidelines that we've adopted. And I'm trying to marry that with the city's stated equity goal, which I taped it. I won't read the whole thing, but it says that the city is committed to establishing and advancing an equitable community for all. Because we know that race is the primary predictor of a person's outcomes across all social indicators, the city of Raleigh will prioritize racial equity to dismantle the policies and systems that have created and sustained these inequities. So then we have the the equitable development around transit guidelines, which seek to improve equity by expanding access to high opportunity areas. So I'm wondering if it might be possible to establish some sort of evaluation framework where we could set some metrics or to measure how well we are doing at meeting our goals at housing affordability. Is it possible to do a racial equity analysis of this proposed action? Something that looks back at those equity goals and can show these are our targets. This is what we expect this action to do in terms of helping to meet those targets. And then maybe on an annual basis, there's some sort of reporting that says a dashboard or something. Hey, this is how we're doing. Oh, we didn't meet this goal. We know we need to do better on this. So it can kind of inform what we're doing. I know some places have like equitable development scorecards and various things like that. I'm just wondering what type of metrics we can put in place. Again, showing our commitment to this being equitable, that would be available for everybody to see, to show how what's being proposed either helps or hurts it. The existing, I mean, there's existing inequity there. So what we're proposing to do is either going to make it better or it's going to make it worse. A racial equity analysis would show that. Do we have any processes in place to do something like that?
So I think we've had this discussion in a couple of different contexts. The one that's most pertinent now is yes, we did put metrics in the rezoning staff report analysis. That was our attempt to try to look at the area around a rezoning request compared to the rest of the city. I can tell you, as someone who worked on that and thought about it very seriously, it is very hard to do. It is easy to have that idea, and I agree with you. It is great that we should have metrics. I think choosing what they are and what they mean to you versus some other number, right? When you're actually looking at what is 12 versus 15. So our result was what's in the rezoning staff report. I'm not saying that we can't do better. I think that's what we had. That's what we presented, or the solution with the tools that we have. I can guarantee you that the next comprehensive plan will try to answer that question. Part of it is, again, going back to a question of values, of what the community thinks is important to track. We have that conversation sometimes. We have it every time a rezoning request happens, but we've never had the citywide conversation in a while, if ever. And so I did try to provide that. I had a lot more data this time around for the rezoning request because we had done the plan and the consultant had given it to me. And so we do know historically that this neighborhood is changing, and it's changing to become with people with higher median incomes who are more likely to be white. Absolutely, I know that's true. I think the intent of permitting more types of housing and more housing, I can tell you historically, zoning was used very explicitly to exclude people from neighborhoods. The way that was done was to limit. So if you limit the places to live, only the people who can most pay for them will ever live there, right? If there's only one iPhone in the world, whoever wants to buy it will be a billionaire. You know what I mean? So the same does apply to housing. So even in instances on this corridor, that is true, where there are places where there is less housing, and that was very explicitly done to limit non-white people from living in those places. So just from a not talking about any in particular neighborhood, I know a lot of folks say, like, I can talk and people talk in generalities about the city and climate change, which is the planet and all that kind of thing. And they are coming to talk to you about their street or their house or something. But in general, permitting more types of housing, which are less expensive, and just more housing in general means it's easier for more people to afford to live in those places. And there's less chance that those people will have to move because they can't, or will be able to move in because they can. That's a pretty generic planning idea. But I know that is true. And then specifically for this corridor, I think, and going back to Mr. Alwell's question from very back in the beginning about what has been changing, I do know these neighborhoods are less expensive, more expensive to live in, and what that effect is having on the people who look like it. So other than giving people assistance for housing, which we are also trying to do, providing them more options, more units, right? Making their competition less fierce. I would say is a direct equity goal, in my opinion. The comp plan has all the other stuff where we should spend cash, for sure, to try to offset things that we can't fix through zoning alone, which there's a lot of problems that we can't fix through zoning alone. And we will have to spend money for that. But I can tell you, 3-story single-family zoning is never going to result in an equitable outcome. I think we've lived 100 years of that.
Right. The metrics the indicators that you include in the rezoning staff reports, that's great. And I didn't mean to imply that we weren't doing anything.
Right.
But I was just wondering if that could be, that really doesn't make a conclusion. It kind of presents all the data.
Yes.
But there are places that are doing actual racial impact assessments that make a bottom line, this is going to be a positive thing, a negative thing, a neutral thing.
So
That's what I was saying. Not so much for our rezoning reports, but for large infrastructure investments like this, particularly that are going through historically black or lower income neighborhoods. I'm wondering what we could do.
Yes, ma'am.
Actually reaches a conclusion, not us, but the city or council, where a conclusion is reached and published, and decisions are made based on that conclusion.
I will say, having read a lot of those scorecards from other cities, they very often are not metrics. They are very often questions that you ask yourself. Not to sort of belittle the effort out there, but they're very often they are narrative questions that say, who will be affected? And it's up to the person, the planner, in this case me, to answer that. There is very little times what is the percentage of, there are almost never numbers. And I can tell you as someone who has tried to write that, I can do what I can. A lot of it is hard for me as a person who values trying to be honest and intellectually honest about how I answer a question. I have not seen a scorecard that offers guidance about what numbers you should be looking at and what's a good number and a bad number. A number that goes up is good and bad is down. Every scorecard I've ever read is, will someone be affected more than someone else? And we do ask ourselves that. I think in every project that the planning department does, we write down who's going to staff it, what the price is going to be, and at the very end there are equity questions where we say, will anyone be affected disproportionately, all that kind of stuff. I would very much like to continue to work on that. I think the idea of the comp plan update is going to try to tackle that. I think in terms of metrics, the best I can say is that what I can tell you is I know what has happened from 2010, from 2000, and I know what was in place there. So at the very least, leaving that in place will continue, in my mind, to do that. Your other statement is very valid. This will either make it better or worse or stay the same. And I think based on how I know housing works, we think this will make it better. I'm not going to promise you I can tell the future, but and unfortunately, the other thing I can offer is that we are committed to, just as we're talking about the numbers in the housing policy and how many applications we get, and continuing to watch and correct as fast as we can.
Thank you. Just looking at the time and the other questions we need to address in our limited time. So just to clarify, do we think that there is an additional scorecard that we could review on equity in this case? Or is that something you can review between now and the next meeting?
I can provide some.
I'm very interested in seeing that updated scorecard.
I have done research about equity scorecards. I can provide some summary of that and some examples that we have. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Let me write that down.
Commissioner Bennett, did you have another?
No, I think what I'll do is I'll email the rest of my questions to you.
Sure.
So that way you can be prepared at the next meeting and I won't be
I appreciate
bombarding you with them. But just to sort of button up what I was saying, I'm not opposed to BRT or TOD. I, as a planner, I mean, I know the good that they can do. I'm just very sensitive to concerns from neighbors. I mean, history is a powerful teacher, and transportation investments have really hurt a lot of communities historically. And so I just want to make sure we do this right. And so I'm trying to make sure I ask questions and I get clarity so I can sleep at night. Because I know the history. I've studied the history. I've lived the history. And when I hear Miss Octavia talk, you know, this is very personal for me, and I try to be very objective up here, and I try to weigh everything, and I try to use my knowledge as a planner and the information that you all present to me, but I'm also a Black woman, and I know the history of zoning and planning, and there's a weight that I carry sitting up here. There's a burden that I carry to make sure that I'm not doing anything to further hurt Miss Octavia and people living along that corridor and other corridors like that. So I appreciate all that you and the rest of the staff do to provide us with this information. And I appreciate you standing up there getting abused sometimes. But it really comes from a good place. I'm just trying to make the best decision I can and not have on my conscience that I was complicit in doing something that further hurt communities that have already been hurt.
Amen.
Thank you.
Now, I would just like to add, I actually live in this community. This is my community, so I agree 100%, Commissioner Bennett. Whatever we do, I want to make sure that the community that I live in remains intact, but also moving forward with the growth of the city, but not left behind in the same manner. Because I understand where we've come from, and so we got to make sure that we don't leave anyone behind, but we bring them along with us and respect what people have worked hard for. I heard you, but also remember that we have to grow because people want to make sure that we're a community. And so I heard everybody today, and I'm looking towards my fellow commissioners who have a lot more experience than I do, because I'm learning from them as well. But I also have a community perspective that I want to make sure I bring along. And I hear everyone, but thank you, Commissioner Bennett. That was the right tone. Thank you.
Thank you both. Other questions and comments from the commissioners on the comp plan? Seeing none, we can discuss it again at future meetings as well, but just to summarize, it's for next time for the comp plan, I have evaluating, adding a new policy under the New Bern corridor under preventing displacement about exploring deepest affordability, potentially more study on the property tax assessments and the impact of underlining zoning conditions, and bringing back more information on equity scorecards. Are there any other topics that I left out on the comp plan amendments topics? Seeing none, then I will move on to our rezoning cases. Turning to the rezoning requests, Mr. Mabel has provided a presentation regarding the criteria that staff has used to create their recommendations on individual rezoning concerns and requests from the public. Would you mind pulling?
Sure.
Got it back on the screen?
So I I organized them in the memo just geographically east to west, so, or inbound in transit speak. In the presentation, though, I have some slides in the front that are all the ones that staff has said to recommends accepting, sort of anticipating that you might have fewer questions and less discussion when property owner is asking for a thing and staff is recommending you accept it. Potentially, we spend less time there. So in the slides, that's how there's ones that say staff should accept, and then it goes again. So I'm happy if you have questions about, I can flip through them quickly. We could focus on people who are here today, if that's your pleasure. I know we're running out of time, but.
Well, I know that we have the potential for 3 additional meetings this fall, and we have to go through each and every case. I kind of at this point want to have the table discuss the criteria and the general process we're going to use to evaluate some of these cases. I think the way you have it organized is very helpful, and if we could go ahead and take some off the table early by looking at those that where the applicant has requested to be included, and the staff has agreed with that recommendation, we could look at some of those and kind of move on from there in a process in the future. I wanted to, looking at these criteria, I do just want to highlight, this is what Mr. Mabel said, which is just because if somebody does not want to be, or let's say first, if somebody does want to be in the transit overlay district, but staff does not recommend it here, that does not mean that in the future, if somebody wanted to be in the transit overlay district and applied for the rezoning in the future, that staff would say that that request is not consistent with the comp plan. So those are actually 2 different criteria. Since we are a legislative body, not a judicial one, we are not constrained by the same criteria that staff was when we evaluate these cases. So if very much appreciating that staff took this sort of objective approach to reviewing some of these cases, but if there are other aspects of the comp plan that you know, as a legislative body, we're permitted to look at those. And when it comes to removing the request to remove a parcel from the TOD, I know we have dealt with this issue several times in the past. There are differing opinions on the Planning Commission, so there may, expect there will be split votes against that. Some feel strongly that the policy goals of the TOD are going to be critical, and we should include those anyway. Others, including myself, have a strong feeling that when the government comes to your property, if you don't want those changes, I take that into very strong consideration as well. And then, and we can sort of evaluate those on a case-by-case basis. And again, even if something is removed today, it does not mean that it cannot be rezoned in the future to be included in the corridor. Is that correct? That no one would have to wait 2 years?
No, absolutely not.
To apply for rezoning? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from commissioners or just general thoughts on how we approach looking at these cases? Yes.
Thank you, Chair Miller. Mr. Mabel, you explained earlier today that you used the same criteria that were originally used in developing the outline of the TOD when you evaluated requests for changes. What is different between your evaluation criteria then and now that would cause you to recommend approval of a request when it was not what was originally lined with the TOD?
Right. So not quite the same. I would say this is on the screen, which is page 2 of the staff report, the criteria for the original configuration of the request. So properties on the corridor, then properties a quarter mile from the corridor, then certain future land use map. Then contiguity was important. So if there was a gap in the TOD with one parcel in between, we included that. It was for application of the actual rules in the real world. A couple of big institutions. We did, like I said, the planning process where some big institutions or big landowners wanted one way or another. Other conflicts with the street design manual or floodplain regulations or stuff. I would say for this request, it was much more granular because it was someone telling me this PIN number, please do something with it. And so that criteria was looking at the goal of the rezoning, which I've said a number of times. And then we do take pretty seriously when we're the applicant how we go about our business and are at a higher standard than a normal applicant. So we don't There's one request in here that's from me because I made a mistake and a number is wrong. And a normal applicant would just change the request. But we are subjecting ourselves to the process to be as public as possible because city council told us to do X. And so we want everything to be as transparent and record keeping as possible. So city council's authorization, and then contiguity, distance from BRT station. So some of them are redundant a little bit. Some of them are not. The future land use map one. I think a lot of them are redundant. I would say in this case, it was just a second look based on now that we know what the request is. There's a little more context there than drawing the request from start, from blank. And so as people have come with individual pieces of land, there is now the puzzle in which they fit, which there wasn't when we drew it to start with. So at some point it is like looking again. I would also say we tend to be, when the staff is an applicant, we tend to lean a little conservative in terms of how the scope, which I know people think we didn't do, but there could have been, to make a boa constrictor, just quarter-mile circles of TOD, which we didn't do. And so sometimes when people are asking to expand, staff's general inclination when we do things is to be marginal increasing. But if someone's wanting to be and take that next margin, then that is also fulfilling the goal, but not something that we would have done on our own. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Good. Sorry for the.
No, sorry.
Yes. One of the questions too, we have a list of parcels where the owners wish to have them removed from the TOD. If we were to remove any or all of them, would that threaten the BRT funding?
No, I
For
don't
the
know.
implementation of the
No,
corridor? Okay.
no.
Can I,
Yes, Commissioner Laitman.
so if there are some particular parcels that we absolutely need to be included, they're opting out, but like, let's say it's right across the street from a bus station or the stop is like right there. I'd want to know.
We don't need any land to build the bus, so we have all that. We didn't need to buy very much in the BRT.
Okay.
The zoning itself is to make the BRT successful, and vice versa, to have transit needs places to go, and people who go to places get there by transit. So the BRT project, is in place. It has the right of way it needs.
And again, they can opt back in. I think I saw somewhere a big map of all the little, where did I see that?
Of the requests?
Yeah.
So we've been using this the map viewer. We have added the requests so they're red and green and blue labeled as in my memo. So as you pan, you'll see all the requests.
I see the snapshots. Oh, so they're the links. Okay.
And then the details is in the backup material of each particular one. But we did get them on the map.
Okay.
So you could see relative to all of the other ones where they're coming from.
Thank you.
Questions and comments on the criteria? Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
One last question. This isn't on the criteria, though, but it's on the rezoning. Related to the comment about the historic properties and the 106 assessment, you'll probably have to come back with this detail because I know we're near the end here. But so as I understand Section 106, if federal funds are being used, you have to do the impact assessment. It sounds like the impact assessment was done and there was a de minimis ruling, but there was something flawed about the impact assessment. So my question is, and you can come back with, if we move forward and we were to approve this with the flawed 106 assessment, wouldn't that also jeopardize the funding?
So Mr. Casefang has communicated that he thinks is a flaw, so to speak, in the assessment. I think the Raleigh Transportation is the grant manager and have been doing their due diligence on that issue and have a response for council. So that will come up to council at some point.
Okay.
I would say as planning commission, my directive to you is that is not your role here, is to worry about city council's funding. We're looking at land use policy and the zoning itself. The BRT and the funding, for sure, Mr. Casefang has raised it. The grant manager, who is walking up to me now, has looked into it, and that is for council to consider as part of the overall request. Yes, ma'am. But I wouldn't say as planning commission, your role is to look at how we're managing our grant money. We have proposed a rezoning. Is that reasonable public interest and supported by all of our policy?
I'm sorry, but excuse me, not to speak for you, Commissioner Bennett.
Go ahead.
But in order for us to make informed decisions as the Planning Commission, we need to have a holistic view what's before us. So therefore, Commissioner Bennett's question is of how we vote on things, and the funding is impacting our vote. And I think that's why she was asking that question. So I thought that was highly inappropriate, unfortunately.
I can try to address that.
Thank you.
So when we
I'd
did
like
get
an answer.
when we did get the comment from Mr. Casefang, and that actually has gone to council members as well, we forwarded that to the Federal Transit Administration as our federal agency partner for the federal funding. And we explained the timeline and the process for when the Section 106 consultation was completed. Again, FTA is the lead agency that handles the federal consultation with the North Carolina State Historic Preservation Office. What that project looks at is the impacts of bus rapid transit project on any historic properties. It looks at what the project is doing within the right-of-way, if there are any right-of-way impacts, if there's any specific project impacts. So that means the stations, what's happening with the dedicated bus lanes, and it looks at rezoning, or not rezoning, it looks at land use at that time. It is not looking at the local rezoning process that the city is undergoing now. And so that's where the differentiation lies.
So if I can, to give you a sneak preview, when council granted your extension, which they did last week.
Why is he?
Sorry? I included in that packet for them a memo of issues we've been hearing from residents. There were 4, I think. It was single family in TOD, which is already underway in the text change. It was building height, it was NCODs, and it was historic properties, were the 4 big sort of themes. And that memo was summarizing that and asking if council wanted to direct me and you to think about that as we move forward with your 120 days. So we are taking that as yes, we were going to propose some alternatives, some more information about those topics as we move forward. So historic properties are going to come up for you in August, let's call it, next meeting. Because we told council we're going to do it. So before we get too in the weeds of council managing a grant, the final answer may or may not be relevant. I think sort of unrelated to 106, we've been hearing about historic properties, right? People speak about it at every council meeting if you watch public comment, and have been telling me about it a lot. So we will be bringing back some ways to potentially modify the rezoning request about historic properties, some alternatives for you to consider because of that. Now, that may also address what Mr. Casefang was saying. I did not do that to respond to him. Het's been doing that. I'm trying to stay out of grant management as far away as I can. But that might also do that. So I do understand the request for more information since that was raised to you. And you might get it for other reasons. I know that might be unsatisfying now, but.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So it is now past 6:30. We will be deferring this case until our next committee of the whole meeting, which I believe is August. Nope. Okay. We are going to send this back to the full planning commission at the August 8th regular meeting of the full planning commission, where we will at that time not discuss the merits of the case. Is that correct? We will only discuss calendaring the next committee of the whole meeting where we can continue this discussion. And starting July 1st, Commissioner Rains will be vice chair of the full planning commission, which means he will be chair of this committee. So he will be chairing those future meetings as well. So thank you very much. I think we have a list of follow-up items, and thank you for everyone who attended and for your robust engagement. With additional comments, please email us. Those go into the official record and are taken under serious discussion. So thank you to everyone, and we will see you in August. Thank you. We are adjourned.